We're delighted to welcome not one but two early years experts to our webinar today, Dr Jo Grace and Zoe Austin. And today they'll be exploring what current research tells us about the causes of autism. They'll be uncovering one of the most damaging myths affecting neurodivergent children. They'll be showing a litmus test that you can use to judge whether your everyday strategies support or inadvertently hinder children. They'll be taking a close look at stimming and sensory experiences, and they're breaking down common misunderstandings, offering practical ways to help both neurodivergent children and their peers understand and thrive. Just a couple of points about our wonderful speakers. Dr. Jo Grace is a dynamic sensory engagement and inclusion specialist. She's a TEDx speaker, an acclaimed author, and the visionary behind the sensory projects. She's been recognised as outstanding by Ofsted, and her insights stem from a rich blend of personal and professional experiences. Her passion is rooted in her family's journey with disabilities and neurodiversity, as well as her role as a devoted foster parent for children with profound disabilities. Zoe is a neurodivergent and trauma-informed speaker, trainer, educator, and consultant. She specialises in neurodivergence, autism, ADHD, education, music education, and schema therapy. She divides her time between consulting mainstream schools and how they can better meet the needs of their neurodivergent children. And she writes and presents on the subjects of neurodiversity, child development, and music making. And she also uses her past experiences as a Penn Green trained classroom teacher, her MA in music therapy, and her past experiences of working in children's social services to inform her position as a holistic practitioner. So as you can see, two amazing speakers we have today. Without further ado, we shall start the presentation.
So stimming, and forgive me if you know all of this and I'm preaching to the choir, but I find that stimming is one of the most misunderstood subjects when it comes to particularly autism, because it's seen as a behaviour. It's seen as a choice, and it's often seen as unwanted. So what is stimming? It's short for self-stimulation, and what it is a repeated or sustained behaviour which may or may not be voluntary or conscious, which stimulates one of the senses. I'm not just talking about the five senses that we know. I'm also talking about proprioception, which is our sense of where we are in the world, where our head is within the space around us. Interoception, which is our sense of what goes on within our own body. So feeling hot, cold, hungry, needing the toilet, emotional responses to things, anything that goes on within our own body. I'm talking about our vestibular sense, or sense of balance. Our autistic brains in particular might be either hyper, meaning very, overly, more than average, or hypo, less than average. We might be hyper or hypo in terms of our neurological responses to any senses. So for example, my interoception, I am autistic, I'm ADHD. My interoception is very, very keen. I experience a lot of pain very acutely. I'm really, really aware of any changes within my body. However, very much hypo in the olfactory state, so I have virtually no sense of smell. So that's just the way we roll, right? You can have a look at these when you get a moment yourselves, but when should we stop a child from stimming? The answer is only if they're placing themselves or others in danger. Okay, so you might see a child, classic stereotyping things are repeated hand movements, walking on tiptoes, rocking, but it could be any kind of sort of repeated movement. Unless that is placing that child or somebody else in danger, let them do it. They need to be stimming. There is a reason for it, which I'm going to go into. Don't stop them. And please don't let anybody else stop them. They need to be doing it for their emotional, but mostly their neurological health. There's nothing wrong with stimming. It just confuses people. My little joke, everybody stims sometimes. Everybody does stim. every single person on the planet. You might bite your nails, you might, you know, be rubbing at your head when you look at the lady there. She's like, oh, I've got this deadline looming. Oh, how am I going to get my Parenta column written? This, you know, tapping your fingers on, you know, these are all stims. They're all methods of self-stimulation, self-soothing. However, neurodivergence do it best. Yeah, we do big stims. We do big stims sometimes. Sometimes. I have to say, as the saying goes, when you know one autistic person, you know one autistic person. We will likely have stims. We might be masking so heavily that we never allow ourselves to stim, but in all likelihood, we'll have big stims of one kind or another. I always like to make myself somewhat vulnerable when talking about this, and I took a photograph of me doing my main stim, which is scratching at my head. I do that all the time, and it calms me down. And that's okay. All right, this slide, I do try to use content made by neurodivergent creators. This is a simplistic but useful little little graphic which shows a bit of some of the experiences of ADHD and autistic people and in general, and then the overlap, and you'll see that stimming is one of them. So ADHD is stim, and autistic people do. I'm talking about that heightened stimming. Hang on. So ADHD stimming can be more like a fidgeting. They might look very similar, but ADHD stimming can be about releasing pent-up energy, or it can be to do with boredom, but it can also be to balance out sensory experiences. Yeah, again, sadly, I don't have time to go into that. Okay, within the DSM, what are we on, 5, 6? I lose track, but the latest one, which is used to diagnose autism, one of the things to look out for are repetitive and restrictive behaviours, which, as they label it, which is what stimming is said to fall under. Now, I read that it is repetitive, but I would argue with the label restrictive, because nope, it might be repetitive, but it isn't restrictive. It sets us free. It enables us to live our lives well. Here's some examples of things which might be good stims. Fizzy drinks, they're often lovely. That's a weighted sloth on that woman's shoulder, which she's obviously very happy about. But also she's got a lovely soft fluffy thing. So stimming and sensory seeking go hand in hand, really. They're all about sensory experiences, and some of our stims might be, well, hang on, I'll get onto that in a moment. When you get your handouts, I absolutely recommend that you click on this link and watch the video whose subject is this guy, Chris, who does a fantastic job of explaining his own stimming. And it's through a brilliant American organisation called Future Learn. Very empowering organisation, very funny in how they challenge preconceptions about well, disability in general, learning disability, autism. I recommend them highly. Have a look at that. Okay, so stimming is not all rocking and hand flapping. As you say, autism, and it's, oh, hand flapping. Now, lots of us do flap our hands. I'm quite partial to it myself. But, and there's nothing wrong with rocking or hand flapping or walking on tiptoe. There's nothing wrong with any kind of stim. But there's a lot more to it than that. It comes in lots of different forms, and it depends on the person, what they need. As I said, these are the 8 senses. I mean, I think there probably are more, but these are the ones that we tend to talk about. And these are certainly the ones that I talk about in my work. And these are some, not all, but some examples of different types of stimming, which you might see in neurodivergent people. So We might have vocal stims like humming or whistling. We might have echolalia, where we repeat things that feel good or sound good to say. We might be moving. Head banging is one which you have to be very safe around, obviously, but it can be a response to a person's head just feeling so full that they're seeking some kind of relief. That would need to be thought about in terms of safety. Jumping, spinning, biting at our skin, pacing, enjoying certain textures, enjoying looking at certain lights. Oh, Christmas, my favourite time of year for lights, for the sensory. The twinkly lights for me are just divine. All manner of things, really. I mean, I could talk about this for a very long time, but it'll be something repetitive which stimulates one of our senses. Okay, we need to enable safe stimming, because stopping it leads to children masking, and masking leads to poor mental health. But before I jump onto that, why do we stim? It's because it balances our nervous system. That's reason number one. There are three reasons. It balances our nervous system. So, for example, if I'll talk personally, if I've been out at a busy cafe and I've had lots of overwhelming sensory input, noise, sound, interactions with people, my brain is going to go fizz, 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 because we have an awful lot going on in our brains. We have more wiring, we may have more grey matter. We experience things in a very heightened way. Again, I'm talking about autistic ADHD people here. I talk about my own experience, but it might also relate to children that you know. So to counter that, imagine my brain is a seesaw, got fizzing over here, I might need some fizzing over here. So I might need to do a stim that helps me feel good. I might need to listen to some music which gives me good stimulation. I might need to lie down, and I've got a lovely fluffy pillow on my bed. I might need to do some of that. So it can be regulating an unsettled nervous system. It can be to do with our emotional expression. Yes, flappy hands are a stereotype, but they're a cliche for a reason. Lots of us use our hands for to express ourselves very beautifully. And I can't remember the third reason, I'm afraid, and it will come to me. But it's to balance ourselves, it's to express ourselves. So you can imagine if a child's being told stop doing that, one, their nervous system is going to be very badly affected, and two, they're going to interpret that message as there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. You're doing something wrong, when actually they're doing something that's perfectly natural to them and that they need to do for whatever reason. Okay, when you're explaining this, I've found that actually children, particularly young children, are fantastic at understanding each other, far more than the adults around them often give them credit for. Yes, they will notice things and they'll say why, and that's fine. But I have found that explaining to neurotypical children why their neurodivergent classmate needs this accommodation or why they do this, and including that child in it as well, so they're not sort of objectified, just say, you know, that's what they need to do when they've got big feelings. I always include in when writing for and working with early years professionals, statistics about sad things for neurodivergent adults, because the early years are, as my tutor always used to say, it's called the foundation stage for a reason. This is where we lay down the start of so many things. Children feeling safe in education, feeling like they're loved, whoever they are, loved and accepted, finding ways to strategize to manage this world which was not built for them, and to know that it's fine for them to be themselves and meet their needs. Masking is what happens when they feel like they can't be themselves, or say we feel like we can't be ourselves. It's a survival strategy where we try to look normal. Okay, now masking leads to poor mental health. I'm going to content warning, trigger warning. I will be talking about suicide for the next minute. So if you need to step away or mute, please do so. Because here we go, masking leads to poor mental health. These are some horrible statistics provided by the excellent Autistic Research Association, Autistica, about suicide levels amongst autistic people. Should have included some for ADHD people as well. They're much higher than in the general neurotypical population. And you know, these are the consequences for people who go through their lives feeling wrong and not being supported and being expected to survive in a world which is actually very difficult for us in many, many ways. These were, and the links are included in my slides. These are some quotations from the National Autistic Society website of autistic adults who say a little bit about what stimming means for them. So I would recommend giving those a read. Here are some links for you. And here we are. This is me. Please do get in touch.
Thank you. It was really enlightening. So without further ado, hand you over to Dr. Joanna Grace.
Thank you, Adele. I was looking at things that are being said about autism in the media, and I'm here to myth bust autism. And one of the first things I would myth bust is actually that idea of there being autism as a standalone thing. Imagine if I was talking about blue-eyedism, you'd be like, huh? No, sorry, that's not a thing. You mean blue-eyed people, don't you? And actually, when we're talking about autism, we mean autistic people. And that kind of I know it's a fiddly thing to think about, but that separating autism from the people ends up with a really sort of dangerous chain of thought where you think, oh, I could get rid of this autism. We need to get rid of autism. You're like, hang on a minute. If I was going, oh, we need to get rid of this blue-eyedism, you'd be thinking, what's her pitch? Am I supposed to be gouging out the eyes of children, or, you know, getting rid of all the blue-eyed children? That would be horribly dangerous. And in the same way, talking about getting rid of autism is horribly dangerous to neurodivergent people. And there's a chap whose name I don't really like to say, but he's been really big on this lately. Somewhere in the middle of last year, he announced he was going to find out what was causing it, didn't he? Don't worry, by September we'll know what's causing it. You know the man I mean, don't you? Looks a bit like a what's it. We're going to figure out what's causing it. And I was slightly curious because I'm a massive reader of research, and research is pretty clear on what's causing it. It's autistic people having sex with other autistic people mostly. But I'll explain that a little bit more. He said by September we'll have this sussed. And then in September they announced it was paracetamol, and then slightly later on circumcision. I don't know if you saw that one. And you think, my goodness, how is this? You're like, if it wasn't so impactful, you'd be quite entertained by how car crash television-y this is. But these and it's not just him, it's our lot as well. Reform UK have recently done a whole spate of equally ridiculous statements about autistic children, about the diagnosis of neurodivergence. You've got people, politicians, just getting off their privileged little bottoms and writing in national newspapers that this is being caused by kind of woke lefty parents making a fuss. It's just a nonsense thing, and it's terribly on the rise. They all say that they didn't used to exist, although if you do chat to people, they go, oh yeah, there was that weird kid at the back of class who just ate berries or something. They say it's everywhere. There's been this outbreak as an epidemic. And actually I'll show you my slides. You'll get the pack of my slides, but if you've seen me talk before, you know that my slides are just things that I use to remind me what I'm supposed to be saying. They're pictures you don't need to see, but when you see it, there is a little line graph that looks like this. So here you go, I'm the diagram. It goes along, down a bit, up, and then it plateaus. And the question is, guess what that's a graph of? And it's a graph of, so you've got a little dip, and then you've got an up, and an along. It's a graph of left-handedness through time. Didn't used to be a thing, because we didn't used to teach people to write, so we didn't care which hand they wrote with. Then when we taught them to write, we found it terribly inconvenient that some of them tried to write with their left hand, so we hit them, and there was a little dip. There was slightly less left-handed people about when we hit them for it. And then a couple of left-handed people didn't get hit as much, and then there was a few more, and then there was a few more. Suddenly it's a bloody outbreak, left-handed people popping up all over the place, and then it plateaus, because there's about that many left-handed people per population generally. Or, what's this a graph of? The presence of gay people through time. Didn't used to be a thing, didn't used to think about it. Then we all got terribly religious. We realised that some people were having sex with the wrong people, and we punished them, and there's less of them about. And then there's a few of them about, and there's a few more of them about, and suddenly they're bloody everywhere, and then it plateaus. And if you pop the graph of autistic people onto those other two graphs, what you'll see is it's following a very, very similar, we're kind of halfway up that upward slope, because there's still a bunch of us we haven't spotted yet. And at some point, hopefully, we'll have spotted everybody and it will plateau. So it's not a thing that is getting more, we're just getting more understanding about it. Those people that were hidden are being spotted. In terms of what it is, a miscommunication between researchers, and what's happening is he's saying, and other people like him are saying, well, we don't know what causes it. Because when researchers do their work, they recognise that knowledge is an ongoing thing. They very rarely claim to know anything, because they are super aware that they're still learning about it. That's going to be the whole of the rest of their career, is trying to learn a little bit more about this particular area in which they're a specialist. And so when they publish their research, they say things like, our findings suggest, or the research indicates. And it's this very sort of gentle, like, we think it's this. They don't go, oh, we know it's this and we're definitely right, because anybody claiming that level of certainty is dangerous. And I could point you to an example, but we've already got one. So there is plenty of research, hundreds of papers that show that autism, being autistic, has epigenetic roots, which is that, so they've identified around 100 genes that are associated with being autistic, and it's the precise combination of those genes that you get that determines your place on the autistic spectrum. That epigeneticness gets misunderstood as well, because I remember when the nonsense first started, it really empowered people who have a distrust of science, who have been disenfranchised from this kind of thing. And somebody in my internet came out and said, I thought it's time you finally knew, Jo, that yes, some people are born autistic, but being autistic is also caused by the environment. It's epigenetic, it's environment and genetic. And I was like, no, that's not what epigenetic means. It doesn't mean it's the environment. It's not. I've got a neighbour who believes it's chemtrails. She believes that the aeroplanes are sprinkling drugs down onto us and that's turning us all neurodivergent. It's not environmental factors. It's not what's in your water. It's not what's in your vaccines. It's not paracetamol. It's the expression of the genes in the environment. So just like a fish is a great animal in the sea, it's a dreadful animal on the sand. It's the genes in the environment that they find themselves in. And then if you pop along from the geneticist to the neuroscientist study our brains at different levels. So you've probably seen, have you seen those brain scan images where they have blobs of colour lit up? When you get my slides, you'll see a little brain scan image. And like they play somebody a song and you see a blob of colour light up on this side of the brain and a blob of colour light up on that side of the brain. When they look at the processing in autistic brains compared to non-autistic brains, they can see the difference at blobs of colour level. They can also see the difference at wiring pattern level. So another way they look at the brain, another way neuroscientists look at the brain, is they look at the patterns of wirings and where the neurons connect and all of these little things. And at that level, being autistic is visible in the brain. They can see the difference. And they look at the brains at molecular level, little tiny, tiny, tiny level, at the firing of electricity through the synapses. And at that level, they can see the experience of being autistic in the brain. And what I'm saying with this is that this is a physiological thing. The interesting thing about the genetics is all the genes they've identified are old genes. And old genes survive in our population because they have survival value. So what it tells you is that there has been a use to society through time of having different types of brains. And that just makes sense, doesn't it? Like it would be useful to have one set that's really good at just focusing on a single thing and figuring out how to make wheels go round. It's useful to have another set that's really jumpy and pays attention to everything, because then when you're having a big party in the cave and a monster goes past the door, they'll notice. And it's useful to have a set that are good at connecting with people and bringing us together into communities, because we're puny little two-legged things and we'll get eaten by the monsters outside the door unless we group together. And so we have these different brain types because they serve a purpose to our survival as a community. They benefit us as a community. And the experience of disability now, and I heard some of what Zoe was saying, and it really resonates with this bit, is not so much that there's something going wrong with their brain, in the same way that there's nothing going wrong with a fish that's on a beach. His problem is he's on the beach, you know. And the problem that a lot of neurodivergent children have is that they're being asked to continuously occupy spaces that are built on the presumption of a neurotype they don't own. I said in the blurb that you read that I would myth bust ideas about autistic experience. So the big one that I want to myth bust is the idea that being autistic is something people are doing rather than something people are being. You know, what are the causes of autism? It's complicated. And, you know, I can't sit here and say it's genetic and it's this, because the researchers who published that work would go, oh, hang on a minute, Joe, you've got a bit, we think it is, maybe it is. But I can tell you very, very confidently that it's not vaccines, that it's not paracetamol, that it's not a defect. It's a neurodevelopmental difference. But when you see it described, so if you've had a little pamphlet about how to support autistic children, or if you've looked up information about autistic children, or maybe you have a child yourself and you've wondered, is this an autistic child? What you will have been thinking about in those situations is the behaviour of the child. Because without the brain scanners, without being those neuroscientists that see inside, see the patterns, see the blobs of colour, see the little firings, all we can tell is a person's behaviour. And so what we're looking at is the behaviour exhibited by that hidden, you like, people say, oh, you don't look autistic. You like, if you could lift the lid on my brain, I'm sure I would. We're watching for behaviour patterns. And when we focus on behaviour patterns, it makes it sound like being autistic is a thing somebody is doing. It is a behaviour that they're producing. Because we spot the difference through patterns of behaviours, we end up thinking along the line of behaviour. And then you have any number of strategies. I mean, Zoe was talking about, I've met children who've been taught not to stim because stimming was the behaviour that was seen. That's the problem. And so if we teach you not to behave like that, then the problem goes away. And oh God, it doesn't. It's like placing a bomb inside that child. It goes off further down the line. I remember doing a talk to a secondary school last year, was asked in as part of their careers week. They wanted to show autistic people could have careers. I was like, hello. And one of the kids put their hand up and he said, in primary school, I was taken out of class to have eye contact lessons. And you're like, what? And I was so, he said, yeah, I was taken out of class once a week and made to practice my eye contact. And I said to him, I'm so sorry the grown-ups did that to you, because that's not okay. Yeah, I'm rubbish at eye contact, great at eye contact on Teams. Hi, everybody. But in real life, if I made that sort of eye contact with you, my words would scramble. But I don't mind it. I can do it. I just won't listen to you very effectively. It depends what you want. If you want a performance of normality, then fine, I'll make eye contact with you. If you want me to listen to you, if you want me to talk to you, then you don't want me to make eye contact with me. My little boy became the UK's youngest published author in 2020 with a book that he wrote when he was 4. And this is, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on screen. Here you go. That's what. Oh yeah, you can. There you go. Look, this is my listening face. This is my mummy's listening face. And he's drawn one face forwards and one face sideways. You know, if a 4-year-old can understand that you can listen in different ways, it's a real challenge to the adult world. And this idea that being autistic is a behaviour then leads on to the idea that, well, it's bad parenting. If the parents were just a bit stricter with them, if people were just a bit firmer with them, what we need is to teach them to behave normally. And I said the other thing I promised you was a litmus test for working out whether the strategies that you're being offered, because there is no shortage of strategies offered to you to support the autistic children in your setting. You can Google, you'll come up with millions. A lot of them are being sold by people who are making a lot of money selling them to you, so be careful. But you'll find strategies all over the place. And my litmus test for them, it's a bit of a silly one. And I would show you the slide, but I don't want to dare see if I've got screen share after all the faff of getting in here. But you'll see the slide when you get the slide deck afterwards. Is, would it help a cat in a swimming pool? That's my test. So you know, this autistic child is biting other people, and they need to learn not to bite. Yeah, cats in swimming pool, terribly bitey if you go near them. You know, we need to give it a star chart and tell it that when it doesn't bite someone, it gets a star, and when it does bite someone, it gets no playtime. Wouldn't help a cat in a swimming pool. Cat in a swimming pool, terribly anxious, worried about things all the time, really heightened is that cat in the swimming pool, needs to do a bit of mindfulness. That wouldn't help the cat in the swimming pool. I know what the cat in the swimming pool needs. What if we take the cat out of the swimming pool for 20 minutes with somebody that the cat gets on well with? It'll be really lovely then. The cat will be really happy out there. And then we throw it back in the swimming pool. That would help. I'm being silly about it, but actually, when you think about it as the cat in the swimming pool, what you're recognizing is that this difference is physiological. And when you're looking for a strategy with regards to autistic people who are displaying struggling in some way, whether that's through you know, behavior that hurts other people, behavior that hurts themselves, if they are expressing that they are struggling, your solution to that should be in the environment. It shouldn't be something that's about that person. And so for a very succinct version of the chat that I was hoping to have with you, I hope that's good. So there's a picture on my slide of a spectrum being squashed by a big foot. And if you'd seen the animation of the slide, we'd have gone from, is autism a thing on its own? No. It's autistic people in the same way that it's blue-eyed people. It's not a separate from people thing. What's causing it? Autistic people having sex with other autists. It's geek chic, isn't it? It's because geeks got more attractive. There's a terrible epidemic of people being autistic in Silicon Valley. Wonder why. It's not paracetamol. It's not stuff in your water. None of that. It's most likely. So this is me using the language of the research. Research suggests it's an epigenetic condition created out of old genes. Old genes have survival value. And the combination of those genes you get determines your place on the spectrum. The result of those genes is different wiring patterns in the brain, and that is a visible difference in the brain to people who look at the brain at that level. So it's a physiological thing. You think of those conversations that we were having a few years ago. I got booked at a lot of events to talk about fidget toys because lots of schools were trying to decide whether to allow fidget toys or not. And if you understand fidget toys to be a sensory support that supports somebody to access an environment that's not accessible to them, in the same way that we understand a white cane to be a support, a physical support to support somebody to access an environment that's not accessible to them, I've never met a school going, should we allow white canes? Do you think that's okay? But in the same way that when somebody's blind, you don't just give them a white stick and go, off you go. It's not any old white cane, is it? It's a very specific white cane. So I did meet some schools who were saying, I met one school where they were allowing fidget toys, but only school branded fidget toys, which was an odd one. But when you've got, once you've got that diagnosis, people talk about a person's place on the spectrum, and you have a whole set of conversations that describe people as more or less autistic. So me and Zoe would be people who are not very autistic, mildly autistic, lifestyle autistic, TikTok autistic, that's what we are. And then the people that you support who don't use mouth words, who display, you know, noticeably odd behavior, they'd be very autistic, severely autistic, profoundly autistic. Interestingly, there's a move by a particular team of researchers at the moment to segregate profound autism from the rest of the autistic spectrum. And it sounds like a nice thing. The way they put it across sounds really nice. They're like, we want to recognize that these people face more challenges, and the autistic community, I'm sure I can speak for Zoe on this one, we recognize those people face very severe challenges. We describe those people as people with high support needs because we're recognizing that need. And they say if we designate them as profound, then that will recognize that. And the autistic community is going, already got it recognized, mate. We already recognize it. And then on the backstage of that, some of those researchers are also on record as complaining about autistic people coming and taking their jobs. They've made a very nice career out of pathologizing us, out of spreading rumors that we don't feel and we don't have empathy. And they don't like the idea that that career might be up. And so if they designate a part of the spectrum that belongs to them, then they will say that people like me and Zoe are allowed to talk about the lightweight autistics, the ones that are just a bit, you know, interested in trains. But those really severely, profoundly autistics belong to them. And that's dangerous. And I have a book coming out about that next. But the spectrum thing, the general understanding is that you get people who are more or less autistic, which is not true. If I showed you all the different pictures of different autistic brains, you could not line them up into a more autistic one or a less autistic one. All you can really see is that it's not a kind of neurotypical one, because a neurotypical brain has a very particular wiring pattern, a bit like tartan. You can tell when something's tartan and you can tell when something's not tartan, which is not to say that every tartan is the same, because all tartans are very unique and individually woven and all of that, but you can do tartan, not tartan. And that's all you can do with neurodivergence. You can do neurodivergent, not neurodivergent. There is not grades of more or less. The more or less that you're experiencing is how much that person's neurodivergence affects you. And I know Zoe did a trigger warning for suicide. So just to jump off that, a really awful example of this is if you look at the different suicide rates of different populations of autistic people. So you look at autistic people with high support needs, with low support needs, boy autistic people, girl autistic people, young autistic people, old autistic people, you know, all these different populations. The population most at risk of death by suicide is the population that Zoe and I fall into. Middle-aged, high ability, autistic people, autistic women. And what you're witnessing in those statistics is a measure of how dangerous masking is. Because middle-aged autistic women, we're the best at pretending not to be autistic. And it has consequences. So the idea that you're more or less autistic is a nonsense. That sometimes people say, have you heard people go, oh, we're all a little bit autistic? That's the idea that, or everyone's on the spectrum somewhere. And it's normally said by people in a very kind way, but it's horribly offensive. And then the very kind people who've said it get worried about why the irrational autistic person has got so offended. I can think of it. If you had it, you would have people who were severely neurotypical, wouldn't you? Like profoundly neurotypical. They probably go to the pub too much. My friend Vanessa, I've got a friend who only dumps a boyfriend if she's got a new boyfriend lined up, and she's on the phone to at least 6 of us to work out which boyfriend she should currently have. Horribly socially connected. She won't have coped well with the power cuts and not being able to message everyone. Profoundly neurotypical. So it would go from Vanessa all the way up to sort of neurotypical people who are just quite organized and good at maths, and then it would flip over into people like me and Zoe, and at the far end it would be people who don't speak and, you know, stim and flap and things. And it's so not the case. If you want to have an appreciation of why it's offensive, if you think of a different spectrum condition, so like being pregnant is a spectrum condition. You're either pregnant or you're not, but once you're pregnant, there's a whole range. Some people glow and it's lovely, and some people, you know, there's a whole range of experience of being pregnant. If you imagine a pregnant person talking to a not pregnant person, and the pregnant person says, oh, the bump popped out over the weekend and I've had to put my skinny jeans in the back of the wardrobe, and the not pregnant person says, oh yeah, I put on 3 pounds over Christmas, my skinny jeans don't fit either. To be honest, I don't imagine they're ever going to fit again. Should we go to the charity shop together? That's nice. That's understanding. Pregnant lady says, oh, and the baby's sitting really low on my spine and I just can't get comfortable at night. And everybody says you should sleep as much as you can before the baby comes, but it's really, you know, my back is really killing me. And not pregnant lady says, oh yeah, I picked up a load of Christmas decorations to put them in the roof at the weekend and I've really twinged my back and it's really uncomfortable to sleep with a bad back. Have you tried putting pillows between your knees? Really nice understanding. Pregnant lady goes, and the other thing that's stopping me from sleeping is I need to get up for a wee like 6 times a night. And not pregnant lady goes, yeah, I need a wee too. I guess we're all a little bit pregnant. Like not pregnant. The pregnant lady is not, hey, hang on a minute, no, we're not all pregnant. I'm pregnant, you're just fat and don't know how to pick up boxes. It totally changes the tone of the conversation. Understanding another person's experience, lovely. Claiming it, offensive. But if you are the not pregnant lady going, yeah, my belly is sticking out more, my back hurts, I haven't had a period in months, because there's a lot of us still hidden. If you are ticking a lot of those boxes, because it's one of the things that stopped me from being identified for ages, was people around me saying, oh, we're all a little bit autistic. And I'd think, well, that's why I think just like these children that I'm working with, is because everybody's a little bit autistic. And then no, we're not all a little bit autistic. Everybody is not on the spectrum somewhere. It is not a linear spectrum from not very autistic to severely autistic. It's a measure of how that person is in their environment. It's, have you thrown the cat into the deep end or the shallow end, or is the cat paddling in a low level bit of water? You look to the environment to make environmental changes. That is your best approach, start out approach to supporting autistic people. I have a bunch of books written. I have 1 million articles that you can read for free online. I'm hugely active on social media. So if you want more information, if you want to ask me something after the webinar's finished, or if you weren't able to watch live, you will find me in the internet and I'd love to talk to you. Thanks for listening to me talk to you fast today.
I'll quickly see if I can get 2 questions in, if that's okay. Helen has said, you thanks Zoe, incredible presentation, so insightful. My daughter masked for a long time and suffered mental health issues, but now she works as a mental health nurse, so that's a really good one for you. And then Trisha asked, I agree with not stopping stimming, but she would also recommend, when you have another child, what would you recommend if she has another child that has misophonia, sorry if I've spelled that incorrectly, or similar, and has the stress response to the stim? How would you stop that, or how would you support that?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I could never really answer unless I know the children and, you know, I'm there in the situation, and that is a tricky one. Yeah, my bread and butter work is one-to-one tuition. I work with a lad at the moment who has a very high-pitched vocal stim, which he repeats often, and, you know, as the adult who's there to support him, I kind of deal with that one myself. But I might do. It's difficult when sensory needs clash like that. Is there anything that could be done to dampen the hate to jump to it, but
you're going environmental. You're going,
yeah,
how can I shift the environment around to make that sound easier? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, have you tried ear defenders or maybe loop earplugs, or is there another space available at home? Or again, would you say that it's difficult to answer when you don't know the
So
child?
my understanding was that there's a child who has misophonia, which is the intense dislike of the sound of other people eating, and that tuning out of eating noises is something that your brain learns to do through time, and not all brains learn to do it. And then you have a child who is eating for stimming purposes, or is making those noises for stimming purposes.
Yeah.
So you're balancing two neurodivergent needs in one household. It's always fun, and it happens a lot in various formats. And so it's partly about having an understanding between us of this is why that person, they're not doing that to attack you. It's not malicious. They're not trying to get at you. And it depends on the level of communication and how people are understanding that, like pitch books and things like that. I used to draw little cartoons for my boys. I have a 11-year-old and a 5-year-old now, and they have different neurotypes, and so that enabling understanding across the neurodivide is something that we have to do a lot. But if you're looking just practical things, that sound of eating, if you can play a white noise sound in the background, that will mask a lot of sounds that are around. If you can add extra soft furnishings to the environment, because if you've got sounds echoing off walls, that you've got a bigger amount of sound. So just having things like pillows around, and if you were in a school, I would be telling you to get those display boards that have the, like those padded boards that people stick. Yeah, everybody who's been to primary school knows what I mean. Having stuff like that around, allowing people to be in different rooms, not sticking to we must eat our dinner at the table, that sort of thing.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And quickly, one question for you. Because Ghislaine, I think is how she says, as she said that Dr. Joe, what about non-verbal autistic children? How can we help them? And then she said, and are there any real food supplements for the brain that can also help you? If there is any, can you cite 2 or 3?
So the majority of my work has been with people who do not use mouth words. And also I work with people who have profound intellectual disabilities as well as neurodivergent conditions. I think when you use words, it's not just a think, you can see it. It's another one of these things that you can see in the brain. When you acquire language, it changes the way your brain is structured. It changes the way you access meaning. It changes the way you lay down meaning. It skews your view of the world, and you end up thinking of words as being meaning, whereas words are a tool that we use to share meaning, but they are just one tool. And the autistic people who don't use mouth words that I work with, I find to be the most extraordinary communicators, because they can convey an enormous amount of information with, you could say, with a limited set of resources, but actually they're just not using the standard set of resources. And autistic people often, not all autistic people, but they often learn language in a different way to non-autistic people, because we're Gestalt language processors, or we may be Gestalt language processors. So you always have these stories of children who say nothing and then like come out with a whole sentence, please will you pass the salt, or something like that. And it's that kind of thing. They learn the meaning, they learn the whole sound, rather than that kind of babbling and then coming into language. Some autistic children will babble and come into language like that. But there's lots of ways of sharing meaning with people who don't use mouth words. And my start out piece of advice for that would be to look at intensive interaction, because it's just the best. And it is a well-researched, evidence-based, beautiful thing.
And then just someone has just quickly said, Apples and Pears Nursery has just said, we have children that have high food avoidance. How best can we support this?
Short answer, the different wiring patterns in the brain create different experiences of sensation. So one of the reasons that your person might be experiencing misophonia is through different wiring in the filtering systems there. So a lot of autistic people, we're sort of familiar with people not liking their socks or the labels in their clothes. We've got this heightened sensory perception. You can have a heightened visual perception. You can have heightened auditory, but you can have all these different heightenings. And if you have all these different heightenings, eating is the hardest thing, because you're being asked to imagine if I asked you to touch something you didn't like you would put your whole body away from it, and you'd put like a bit of you, and you'd touch it as far away. You certainly wouldn't bring it up to your face to touch it. Like if I've got some horrible goop, you wouldn't put it in your face. It's so invasive. And at the same time as I'm asking you to touch something, I'm not even asking you to touch it with your fingers. Your fingers have got lots of nerve endings, but your lips and your tongue have even more. So I'm asking you to touch something that you might struggle with the texture of, not at a distance from you, not even just in intimate space, literally in your face with a really sensitive part of your body. And at the same time as I'm asking you to do that, I'm also asking you to smell it, to taste it, to look at it, to hear it. It's horrific. And so there's loads of reasons why people who process sensory information differently would struggle with eating. It's a massive topic. If you want to come and find me online, I'll happily have that chat. But if we have that chat now, we'll be here until it's school pickup. Sure.
I'll just quickly add to that, if I may. In terms of sort of policy within settings and provision, you really have to sort of let go of your standard ideas around eating. And when it happens and how it happens and if it happens. I mean, it's important that a child has that calorie intake in the day. It might need to happen at home. They might not be able to eat whilst they're with you. It might be too much for them. Please do not judge their parents if they're sending in what some would class as junk food. It might be, that child can only tolerate chicken nuggets and a pita bread or something very bland. Let them know that it's absolutely fine for them to send in whatever the child might actually manage to eat. Reassure them that if the calorie intake is high enough throughout the day, so whether that's before they come to you. I'm thinking about a little boy I know who has 4 hours a day in nursery, so he can eat before, he can eat afterwards. If he manages to eat whilst he's there, fantastic, but they absolutely understand that might not be possible for him. It also might be, I had a little boy in my reception class who just couldn't tolerate what he was being sent in with for lunch and couldn't be in the lunchroom because it was awful, and he burnt an awful lot of nervous energy throughout the day, so he needed to have bland, safe, dry snacks throughout the day. And it's not, well, that's not fair on the other children. They understood, okay, Ricky, he uses energy differently to you, and he needs to have a breadstick right now because he finds it difficult to eat at lunchtime. So practically speaking, I would say challenge your own thinking around their eating whilst they're with you. I'm talking to professionals here.
Thank you so much, Zoe, and thank you, Joe.
Okay.
That was fantastic as usual. Thank you so much for everybody who's joined us today, and a special thanks to Joe, Dr. Joe Grace, and Zoe Austin. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you on the February webinar, guys. I'll put that in the chat as well. We will send that again. See you all later.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.